When Jonathan Aldridge's only child, Clara, was born, the world expected miracles. He was a billionaire whose name was synonymous with innovation and control. Every stock, every building, every private jet under his name operated with machine-like precision. But his daughter, delicate as porcelain and silent as a snowfall, was a mystery no amount of money could solve. At 3 years old, Clara had never uttered a word. Doctors examined her endlessly. Speech therapists brought in toys and charts and patience. Specialists with degrees longer than their business cards sat in plush Aldridge chairs, shaking their heads in defeat. The diagnosis was always the same: there's nothing physically wrong. Sometimes children simply choose not to speak. Jonathan didn't believe in sometimes. In his world, there was always a cause and thus a solution. But no amount of coaxing, bribery, or high-priced education changed the fact that Clara's soft lips stayed closed. The mansion had become quieter than any home with a toddler should be. Nannies came and went like revolving doors. Some were too strict, others too tender, a few too frightened of Jonathan's cold precision. When Mrs. Barlow, the head housekeeper, suggested hiring someone different, Jonathan dismissed it with a wave of his hand. Different didn't solve problems. Then, one rainy Thursday morning, Different arrived at the front gate. Her name was Lila Mae Thompson, a woman in her late 20s with deep brown skin, eyes like warm coffee, and a quiet confidence that made the butlers glance twice. She wore a neatly pressed navy dress and held a single worn leather bag. She had come recommended by an agency Jonathan didn't recognize, one that Mrs. Barlow claimed found the right hearts for the right homes. Jonathan wasn't in the mood to interview, but Clara's breakfast sat untouched again, and the silence was a weight he couldn't shake. He met Lila in the sitting room, scanning her resume. No Ivy League education, no gilded certifications, just 10 years of private domestic work, and an air about her that said she was unafraid of luxury or the man who owned it. "You've read the file," Jonathan said, closing the resume. "You know the child doesn't speak." "Yes, sir," Lila replied evenly, "and I'm not here to make her. I'm here to listen." Jonathan arched an eyebrow. "Listening has done us little good." "Then perhaps," she said, "you haven't been listening to the right things." Mrs. Barlow, sensing a storm in Jonathan's tightening jaw, hurried Lila toward the nursery. Jonathan almost called her back, but for some reason he didn't. Clara was in her usual place by the window, staring at the drizzle trailing down the glass. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, worn to near transparency. When Lila entered, the child didn't look up. Most new staff tried to break that barrier immediately, talking too much, making bright noises, crowding her space. Lila didn't. She walked slowly, set her bag down, and sat cross-legged on the rug. She took out a small wooden puzzle, the kind you could buy in any thrift store, and began fitting the pieces together without looking at Clara. After a minute, she spoke, not to the child, but to the room itself. "This rain," Lila murmured, "it's the kind that carries stories. If you listen close, it'll tell you things no one else hears." Clara turned her head, just enough to see her. Lila kept working. A piece didn't fit. She set it aside without frustration. For the rest of that first day, she said almost nothing. She hummed softly while folding clothes, arranged Clara's books by color instead of size, and before leaving, placed the unfinished puzzle in the center of the rug. By the third day, Clara was sitting beside her as she worked on it. By the fifth, the child's tiny hands were fitting pieces into place. Jonathan noticed the change without admitting it. Clara began following Lila to the kitchen, watching her bake cornbread that filled the mansion with a scent no chef had ever managed. At bedtime, Clara would curl against Lila's side while she told old Southern folktales of Biara Rabbit, of spirits in the woods, of rivers that could sing if you walked them just right. And still no words, until the storm. It came on a Saturday night, sudden and violent. Wind screamed against the glass, lightning cracked the sky in white fury. The mansion's power flickered and died, plunging its marble halls into shadows. Jonathan was in his study when Mrs. Barlow burst in. Sir, Claire's awake. She's crying. Jonathan had never heard those words. Clara cried. Yes, but silently, tears without sound. He hurried upstairs, heart pounding, only to stop outside the nursery door. Through the wood, he heard not crying, but a low, rhythmic voice. Inside, Lila sat on the floor with Clara in her lap, the storm casting wild shadows around them. The little girl's face was buried against Lila's neck, trembling. "It's all right, baby," Lila whispered. "I'm here. You're safe. I promise." Jonathan stepped forward, but something in Lila's expression made him pause. She wasn't just comforting, she was waiting. Then as thunder rolled, Lila leaned closer and said 3 words so soft Jonathan almost missed them. "Mama loves you." For a heartbeat, nothing. Then Clara's small voice, raw, unpracticed, but clear, broke the air. "Mama?" Jonathan froze. Lila's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "Yes, baby. Mama loves you, even when she can't be here." The child lifted her head, studying Lila as if trying to see the truth in her face. Then, in a voice trembling with both question and certainty, she whispered, "Mama loves me." Jonathan's chest tightened in a way he hadn't felt since his late wife's funeral. In the days that followed, Clara's words came slowly, like buds after a long frost. She spoke to Lila first, then to Mrs. Barlow, and eventually to Jonathan, calling him Daddy one quiet afternoon as they sat in the garden. He had to turn away, so she wouldn't see the tears. It was Lila who explained, gently, that Clara's silence had never been stubbornness or a medical defect. The girl had been 2 years old when her mother died in a car accident, too young to understand death, but old enough to feel the absence like a missing piece in her own body. No one had spoken to her in the language of that absence, the kind that says the lost person still exists in memory, in love. Lila had seen it before, in children she'd cared for in smaller, poorer homes. Sometimes, all it took to open a locked heart was the echo of the voice they missed most. Jonathan didn't ask how Lila knew the words his wife used to whisper at bedtime. He didn't ask if she had guessed, or if somehow Clara herself had told her without speaking. He only knew that the house was no longer silent. Months passed. Clara laughed now, her voice ringing through the mansion like the chime of a long-forgotten clock. She and Lila planted flowers in the south garden, baked too many pies, and spent rainy afternoons finishing puzzle after puzzle. One evening, as Jonathan passed the nursery, he heard them talking. Clara was recounting a dream, something about flying over the ocean, in a rush of soft, excited words. Lila listened, smiling, as though every syllable was a jewel. Jonathan realized then that he had been wrong all along. Some problems can't be solved with money or power or control. Some require a presence, a patience, and a love that money can't buy. But fate, it seemed, had found a way to send it anyway, in the form of a woman who knew that sometimes the right 3 words could change everything.